Hello and welcome to this driver pay training video. My name is Vinny and I'm a training manager here at PortPro. I'll be guiding you through a step-by-step process on how to enhance driver pay management and to customize tariffs effectively. What's on the agenda? First, we'll go through some basic setup, so creating driver profiles, driver pay and the driver mobile app, charge codes, and the creation of deductions. Then we'll go through the driver pay setup, which will cover creating driver groups, settlement settings, creating reoccurring deductions, driver tariffs, and driver pay charge profiles. Understanding driver pay. Why does it matter? By mapping your existing driver pay methods into the system, you lay the foundation for both accuracy and innovation, ensuring your current processes are reflected while uncovering opportunities for improvement. Some key questions to consider is, do you have different settlement periods for drivers? So if you have owner-operators and company drivers, do they differ when it comes to the settlement periods each are paid on? How are drivers currently paid? Hourly, salary, per mile, etc. And how do you handle additional pay like accessorials? So for example, chassis splits, pre-pulls. Are those something that you reimburse the driver for? So key concepts that we'll explain are tariffs, which are the foundation of your payment system. Tariffs define standardized rates and conditions for specific activities. By setting these rules, they enable the automated calculation and assignment of driver pay once a load is dispatched. And charge profiles, an individual pay item such as base rate, fuel surcharge, or accessorial fee that defines a specific component of compensation for a driver activity or move. Charge profiles exist within a tariff and serve as the building blocks of the payment structure. While they define what is paid for, they must be included within a tariff to enable automation of driver pay. So both driver profiles and tariffs exist together to create the automation in the PortPro system. All right, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to go over is the driver profiles. So to access driver profiles, we're going to go to Drivers, Driver Profiles, and we're going to create a new driver. Now when you create a new driver, these are the first steps to ensure that when you do start building driver pay, that everything is built correctly, because we need to make sure that there's drivers in the system. So the first thing you'll need to enter are the basic requirements, which is the first name, the last name, the username, which will be the username the driver uses to access the mobile app, the email address the driver has, temporary password, a phone number, and if you work out of multiple branches, you'll need to add the branch information there. Okay, so branch is essentially an additional office, so if you have multiple offices throughout the United States or wherever you're based out of, you would define the branch there. So let's just go ahead and add a name here. Okay. And when you add a username, the system will check if that username is not being used, and if it isn't, you'll get the check mark. Now under the email, you can enter a test email, or a dummy email as we say. The best thing though is to use an email the driver has access to so they can reset their password if they need to later. And then the temporary password, you can just enter that here, just entering some characters here. Keep in mind it has to be a minimum of 10 characters with one special character in there. Now let's enter a phone number. And then I'll select my test branch. Now the other thing you want to fill out, and this is not a requirement, but this is a very helpful field so you can classify the drivers, is here under select profile type. You can select this is a company driver or an owner op. You have additional options here that you can select based on what the driver is. but this is where you'll go and classify that driver. This is one of the places. So I'm going to say this is a company driver. Now regarding compliance, there's additional fields here at the bottom. So expiration dates on specific compliance information, document information, emergency contact, etc. You also have preferences here. That this will be able to control what the driver prefers when it comes to loads that they want to operate, if they're day shift versus night shift. But I want to skip over here to mobile permissions. The specific permissions I want to highlight are the ones that will be impacted by driver pay. And those will be the never show access to settlements tab, or never show driver pay to this driver. So the first one, I'll select it. And that one basically controls the settlements tab in the driver app. So if you do not want your drivers to see what their settlements at the end of the pay period, once accounts payable process the settlements, you can turn that on, and that'll disable that settlements tab. The second is never show driver pay to this driver. What this controls is the individual pay the driver is getting per move or per load. If that's something you do not want your drivers to see, you can select that, and that'll show a blank line in the driver pay section of the dispatch in the driver app. Okay. So if you turn these on, basically the driver will not have access to view any pay from the mobile app. Okay. Keep in mind, never show driver access to settlement tabs. The settlement has to be finalized. If the settlement is not finalized, they won't see it. Okay, so it has to go through a process where you finalize the charges and confirm, or finalize the pay, I should say, and you confirm that it's valid. Okay, but once you've added all that information, I'm going to turn it off here. I'll click Add, and the driver will be added here to your driver list. Okay. If you need to make changes later on, you simply just click on the pencil icon here to the left, and you can make changes or updates as needed. Okay, including mobile permissions. You can also add documentation here. So if there's certain documentation you need to keep for the driver, you can add that as well. Okay. So that's the first building block in driver pay. You want to make sure there's drivers. The second thing I want to talk about is settlement settings and deductions. So settlement settings will exist here under drivers again, and we're going to go to the driver pay rates module. One thing to note about navigation in PortPro is if there's sub-modules within the main module here, you can also access them from the top. So I have the tabs here. So I'm going to go to driver pay rates from here, and it'll take me to the exact same location as if I were to click it from here. Okay. We're actually going to jump over to settlement settings first, because we want to make sure that we're setting up the settlement period. Okay. So under settlement periods, you'll select it here. And this is where you define what is the pay period for each driver group, I should say. So to program that, you'll click on this green Add New Settlement Period button here at the top right, and you'll name the period. So let's say your owner ops get paid every 2 weeks versus your company drivers every week. You can name the period just like that. So we can just say weekly, and then I can select the duration type. So since we're doing weekly, I would select the weekly duration, and then I would select which day of the week does the week start on. Okay, so I can choose which one. I'm just going to leave it for Sunday. Okay, so I'll create the settlement period, and when I create the settlement period, you'll see it populate here. Okay, now I'm going to create another one, and I'm going to do owner ops, so OO, biweekly, just to give you an example. So I'll select biweekly here, and then I have to tell the system what is the effective date. So when is those 2 weeks starting? So we'll just say that the 2 weeks started January 1st, just giving you an example. Okay. So I'm going to hit create settlement period. and now the system has those saved into the system. Okay. Now these will be used in a later step. Now the next thing I want to go through is deductions, but before we get into the deductions tab here, I want to explain how the deductions work in PortPro. So in order for deductions to be programmed, you need to make sure that the names are set up in the accounts receivable or accounting settings. Okay. Now those settings exist here at the top under the gear. So if I select the gear and I go to accounting configurations, and then I come down here to deduction name, this is where I'll start to name the deductions that I have in my operations. Okay. Now these are just names. Here you don't do any programming of what the deduction amount is or when to take it out. This is just strictly the name of the deduction. So to create a new deduction, you click on the green button here at the top and you name the deduction type. So let's just do owner op insurance. Now for some of you, you'll only see this line. For others who have GL codes or more specific mapping for accounting, you'll have this GL code here setting turned on. Okay. Otherwise, you'll only see this line that says deduction type name. So I'll hit create deduction type, and then I'll see the deduction populate here at the top. You can control when these deductions are active versus inactive. You just simply toggle them on and off here using the toggle. If you need to update the name, you can click on the pencil and update the name. Okay. Now let's go back to driver settlement settings and deductions. So what I'm going to go through here is the reoccurring deductions. Okay. Reoccurring deductions are deductions that are going to be set up on a frequency. The way that works is you'll select the driver that you're going to add deductions. So we'll select our new driver added here. And I'm going to click on this eyeball icon. Then the next step is to add the deduction. So let's say I need to add insurance. Okay, I'm just going to do regular insurance. And then I'm going to select what branch does this driver belong to, or which branch is doing the deduction. So since this driver was under the test branch, I'll put them under the test branch for the deduction. And then here I'll do health insurance. Under type, this is where I select if this is a fixed deduction or a percentage. So you can choose between both. I'm going to say this is fixed because the driver is going to be taken a set dollar amount from each from the frequency that I set up. Under action, I'll select subtract. You can also use add. Add is very helpful if you need to reimburse a driver or maybe add a bonus. You can use the add function here. Okay. Now under frequency, you have different options you can select. You can select weekly, every 2 weeks. You'll have to define what day of the week. You can do monthly, which will be taken out the start of the month. Specific day of each month, so again monthly, but you can select the day. And then settlement period is basically every period that passes will include that deduction. Okay, so I'll use settlement period. And under recurring amount, this is where you'll enter the amount that will be taken out, in this case every settlement period. So under recurring amount, let's do $250. And then the next thing I'll have to do is put an end date for this deduction. So if this is going to be a new hire, maybe I'll put a date way in the future. If maybe you check these things every year, you can put it for the date of the following year. It's really up to you. I'm going to select a date far in advance, or far in the future. So I'm just going to do August 1st, 2030. Then once I'm done entering here, I can click anywhere outside that cell and it'll save the deduction. You'll get a notification confirmation here at the top, and then you'll get the status toggle turned on. Okay. And then under the upcoming tab, you'll see when this deduction will come out next. Okay. Now you can also enter deductions like on escrow accounts or cash advances. I'll show you quickly how that works. So we'll just do parts. Let's say parts. cash advance. Then we'll do fixed, subtract. So we'll do settlement period as well. But this time we'll say it's $100, but there is a limit. Let's say we lent the driver $950 for parts. As soon as I enter that limit, you're going to have an end date. The system's going to calculate the end date based on the total and the frequency. Once you see that date populate, you simply click outside of the cell you're in, and the system will tell you what's the total remaining and how many periods are remaining. Okay. Any changes you make here will be recorded in the audit tab at the top, and you'll be able to see when expenses were added, removed, closed out, etc. Okay. And after the deductions are added, you'll see here under status how many are enabled versus disabled. Okay. All right. So let's recap. We made sure the driver profile was in the system. We set up the settlement settings, and we set up the reoccurring deductions. Now the next thing we need to do is group the drivers. So I'm going to go to driver pay rates here at the top, and it's automatically going to take me to driver groups. So what's driver groups? Driver groups are essentially a set series of drivers that are going to be included in your driver pay calculations. Okay, so this grouping is where you'll put your company drivers together, your owner ops together, all your drivers together. It really varies on how you need them set up. Okay, so for example, you can keep it basic. I have an example here at the top. I have company drivers versus owner ops. Or you can get specific, right? If you're working with multiple terminals or branches, I should say, you can say company drivers LA Long Beach, company drivers Houston, company drivers Chicago. Same thing for owner ops. You really have the option of classifying your drivers as you're needed. And this is going to be important when you do accounts payable, because the accounts payable system in PortPro is separated by these groupings in a way, okay? Because each one of these groupings also includes a settlement period. And I'll show you that in a second, okay? So to add a new group, you'll select Add New Group here at the top. And here I have my new driver. So what you first do is you select the name. So let's say we'll do company driver. Let's use one of the examples I came up with. We'll do Chicago. Now let's say I wanted to add these two. I just simply click on the add. And once you see it's added, those two drivers are added in there. Now I want these guys to be under my Chicago branch. Okay. Then when I hit next, the system will ask me, okay, well, what settlement period you're going to use for these drivers? And this is where I can select the settlement period. So let's say I'm going to do weekly because they're my company drivers. And then when I hit complete, you'll see that group up here. Okay. Now, again, what's really important to note that this group is driven a lot by the settlement period. So when you do accounts payable, you'll be able to look up specific driver groups using that settlement period. Okay. So again, the way you group the drivers and then the way you set up their settlement period will determine how they're found or how you filter in accounts payable. Okay. I just want to note that so you know when you do the accounts payable training, you'll see that this is one of those building blocks to ensure efficient accounts payable processes. Okay. So we'll hit cancel. So once you have the group set up, now it's time for us to actually start building driver pay automation. Okay. So to build out driver pay, you'll first go into driver tariffs. So let's again go over the definition I mentioned earlier. Driver tariffs are essentially the building block of the automation. This is where you define the loads where the automation will exist on, and there's various conditions that you can use to define when they're triggered. Okay, so I'm going to reset my tariff here, and we're going to make a brand new tariff. So I'm going to select Add Driver Tariff here at the top, and I'm taken to the new driver tariff window. There's two options here. You can do basic conditioning, which we'll talk about in a second, or advanced routing matching. If you select advanced routing matching, the system will ask you to confirm that's what you would like to choose, and it'll also let you know that this will erase any basic routing or conditions you set up here. So I'm going to select change anyway. Now when I select it, it's going to take me to the routing view, right? So the way this works is if I have customers that have custom routing and that rate is based on that custom routing, I'll define the routing here and then define what the charges are. Okay, so for example, if I need to add, there's a two delivery, and then there is a we'll just say a stop off somewhere, that will define what type of stop off it is. So you see I'm customizing the rate, and then based on where I select here, and then I come over here to add a new driver pay, I can select the items I need to add. And we'll talk about these two buttons in a second because they also exist in the basic. But I want you to understand from here is this is a tool that's used for pricing if you need to do custom routing. Okay. Now let's jump over to basic. It's going to give you the same prompt, but this time tell you that the advanced routing will be deleted. So under the basic, this is where I really like to do these trainings because it gives you an idea of how the system works, and then later on if you do need to do advanced routing, it makes a lot more sense. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is name the tariff. So we're just going to call this test tariff, but you can name it if it's a customer tariff. You can name it the customer name. If it's a general tariff, you can call it general tariff. It's really up to you what you name it. Okay, just make sure you use something that identifies it quickly and effectively. Then you're going to select the effective start date. So when is this tariff going to be effective from and to? Okay, so we'll say this is actually a tariff that was started on January 1st. And then effective date, we're just going to say December. Let's say this is a contract we have, right? If this is something that's going to be a forever rate, you can even go and select a date that's much more in the future. Okay, totally up to you. I'm just going to change this back for the end of the year. Okay. Then under load type, you'll define which load types does this tariff apply to: import, export, road, or all. So you can select both or all three. Okay, but let's say I just want this to be for imports, so I can leave imports there. Now on branch, again, this only applies if you have multiple offices in different locations. You can select that here. I'm just going to select my test branch. And then customer, I can select the specific customer this will apply to, or I can start typing in all customers, and it'll apply to every single customer. But I'm going to select the specific one. We'll use this first one here. And then under pickup location, you can get granular. Absolutely. However, let's say this is the rate I want to apply for all my Cargill moves, so any locations. Let's say I just have 2 lanes, but they're in the same area, the same price. Rather than being specific, I can just keep this general, save some time, and just type in all customers. Now I know it says all customers, but this doesn't mean that it's also going to apply to other customers besides cargo. What this means is that this is going to apply to all pickup locations, so any locations you've set up as a terminal, or all delivery locations, so all locations you've set up as a warehouse, so long as they exist under loads for the customer cargo. Okay, you can leave return location blank. Everything else here at the bottom is optional. Okay, you don't need to select it if it doesn't apply, but it's there available to you. Okay, Now, after you define those required conditions, the next thing you're going to do is select Add New Driver Pay. Now, we're going to select next Add Charge Item. This will take us to the charge profile window. Okay, so this is the individual charge item. Okay, this is what builds the tariff. We have the tariff there telling and tells what loads to apply the charges to, but now we need to tell the system, right, what are we charging, or what are we paying the driver in this case. Okay, so the first thing you'll do is select the driver group. So I have all driver groups, company drivers. So this is where you can start differentiating which pay for which group. So the groups we created, those names are going to be here. Okay, so I'm going to select company drivers. And then under charge profile name, this is what I'll be naming or defining this charge as. Okay, so this is what it'll exist internally for me. So I'm just going to do base price. We'll keep it simple. And then under charge name, this is where I'm going to select the charge code. So when you did onboarding, you have charge codes that you created that'll correspond to your accounting software. Okay, so for example, for base price, my charge code is base price. It could be different for yours. It really depends on your operations. Then under unit of measure, this is where you'll select how is this charge or this driver pay defined, right? Or how we're measuring it. So you have a lot of different options you can select. I'm going to select here fixed. Let's keep it real simple. Effective date based on. If there's charges that are based on a specific event when it occurs, so let's say pulling of the container, delivering the container, things like that, you can tell the system, hey, based on this date, when this happens, charge this, right? That's a helpful charge when you're doing something like fuel. Charge description, that's what the customer will see on their invoice. So in the charge description, I'm just going to put drayage move. That's what I want the the driver to see. Okay, so this is what will appear on their settlement. Auto add to load, you got to make sure this is marked as yes. And then we'll need to select what are we paying the driver, like how much are we paying them for this base move, base price. So I'll select add new charge. And then here I'm just going to put 250. Minimum amount and free units can pertain to driver pay. It really depends on what type of pay you're giving to the drivers. Typically company drivers will just, from what I've seen, be a fixed amount. But if you need to pay them a minimum amount for some move or some type of transaction, you can do that. If there's any transactions that you're paying, maybe your owner ops, where they have to give you certain free units, you can enter the free units here. Okay, but I'm going to keep it simple with 250. And then the next thing is you're going to select conditions. So these conditions are what trigger the charges to occur. The first conditions here are, we'll call them move conditions. So you can select specific events within the load that'll trigger the charge, specific moves, or specific legs. So I'll show you by event. Select by event, you can select a specific event within the life of the load that'll trigger this amount to happen. By move, you can select multiple events with a specific event time to trigger that. Or you can do by leg. Well, it'll give you two fields, so you have a from and a to leg, and if you define those, that'll trigger the 250. Okay. Now I typically leave this blank if it's a fixed amount. You know, in this case, I'm paying the driver this amount for any cargo load from any of the pickup delivery locations. Okay, so I can leave that alone. Lastly, it's the conditions. These are more of a load level conditions. So if I select add rule, I can do conditions like load type, customer, terminal, warehouse, container type, a lot of different options that I can select from. So this is where I can get even more granular as to what will trigger this. So let's say this 250 will only apply to any time a 40-foot container is moved. So we'll do container size, any in, 40 foot. I can get even more specific and I can do container type high cubed. So there's a lot of different conditions you can select. The best thing to do is take your time and go through them and see which conditions you'll need, if any, when you're setting up your driver pay. But again, you can keep it extremely simple, or you can get extremely specific. But you can get specific either here in the charge profile, or you can get specific here under the driver tariff. Okay, completely up to you. But once you're done working on the driver charge profile, you'll select Add Charge Profile. Nope, we're missing a field here. Oh, it's the by event. So let me redo this real quick. Okay. Let's just define this real quick here. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to remove this again and add it because I don't want it to include the event. Okay, company driver, charge profile name. All right. 250. Cool. All right, now I can add additional charges here, but let's say that's all I needed to add. I can click on Create Driver Tariff, and I'm all set. Okay. All right, so now let's test this tariff out. So we'll go to Dispatcher, come over here to Filter, Load Type, Import Cargo. And then we're going to select one of these available containers. Let's select this one here. We'll make sure the branch is set up to test. Let's just confirm to make sure that's how our tariff is set up. Keep in mind if the tariff is set up for a different branch, it may not work. So we have it for test. Great. Let's just confirm our driver profile or driver group is set up for there as well, so you don't have any issues. Oh, let's add test here. Good. Okay. So now we'll come over here. So it was really good we went through that just to show you some troubleshooting if you do work out of multiple branches. Okay, so let's grab this one again. Make sure there's no other payables. Great, so you can see here nothing there. And if I go ahead and add, we should be able to see the charge populate. And sure enough, here it is. So 250. Okay, now if I were to remove the driver, that should be removed as well. Okay, so it looks like it's working. Great. Let's go back here. We're going to go back to driver pay rates, and we're going to go back to the tariff. And let's open it up using the edit tool. So I can add additional driver pay here if I need to. So let's say I needed to add fuel. Let's say I needed to add maybe an accessorial we pay the driver. I can do it directly from here. Now, there's a con to doing the charge item directly in the tariff. That one issue is if you need to make edits, you have to go into the tariff to make the edit, right? Or let's say this base price is going to apply to another customer, or I should say driver group, or another driver pay tariff. I have to make it every single time I make a tariff. So that might make things a little bit more complicated, right? So what I can do is I can actually create charge profiles independently of a tariff. So how do I do that? I'll hit cancel. And instead of going to driver tariffs, I'll go to driver charge profiles. Now from here, I can actually create charge profiles outside of a tariff that I can edit whenever I need to. I can change the pricing whenever I need to. And I can add it to as many tariffs as I need to. Okay. So what I do is I just select Add New, and it takes me to the charge profile window. Okay, and you basically go through the process of setting up the charge profile, and once you set it up, you'll see it populate here. So let me show you some that I created. So let's say a pre-pull here. So let's say I give this driver a percentage of a pre-pull. So if I go into pre-pull, this applies to all my drivers. I am named it pre-pull. Same thing with the charge name and description. I set it up as a fixed charge, and the drivers get $100 of the pre-pull. Okay, and I defined the system to calculate by leg. So anytime there's a pickup container to a drop container at my Chicago yard. You don't need to add the event location, but you can if you need to. And then the last condition I added was it has to be dropped before delivery. Okay, so that'll make sure to capture that drop specifically. Okay, so this is just an example. I also have a fuel here, and this one's based off a percentage. The percentage coming off the base price. I'm going to change this to the invoice. So this should be, oh, sorry, actually drive charges is fine. So this will come off the base price of what I'm paying the driver. I set it up to yes, auto load. And under the fuel matrix, for this scenario, I'm not using a fuel matrix. So I'm keeping this pretty manual. So I'll say it's 15%. And I don't have any specific conditions when this will apply. This is basically going to apply anytime I add a driver. Okay. So you can create additional charge profiles here. Now the nice thing about these charge profiles as well is I can group them. So if there's a specific group of charge profiles that should always be added to a tariff, I can click on driver pay profile groups, click on create group, and simply select the charges I want to group together. Then I'll name the group, and I can enter a description of that group. Once I'm done, I'll hit create group here at the bottom, and it'll save the group here. So I created one called common accessorials or accessorials, and if I click on the pencil, I can see and edit what I added to that group, and you can see I have chassis split, stop off fuel. I'm going to remove the chassis split and add the pre-pull, and then hit update group. I can also click on this little eyeball and it'll show me the accessorials there. Okay. So now that I created it separately, how do I get it into the tariff? So the way that works is I'll go to driver tariff, and then I'll select the pencil here, and then I'll click select charge profile. Now what I can do is I can actually add one at a time if I want to. So let's say I wanted to add stop off. I can click apply, and it'll add it here. What you'll notice is you'll also see this profile icon under the stop off. This lets you know that this is an independent charge profile that lives outside of the tariff. So that way you can differentiate what types of charges you have in here. You can also click on the eye, and it'll show you what the triggers are for it too, since again this is created independently. Or I'm going to delete this. I can click select charge profile, go to charge profile groups, and select that group I just created, which includes the stop off. So I'll hit apply, and then if I click on the eyeball, I can confirm what I have looks good, and then I just hit update driver tariff. So now I have 4 charge items in the tariff, but because I have one grouped, it looks a lot cleaner, right? Instead of having a bunch of lines. And this is best practice because visually it kind of gets a little overwhelming if you have a lot of lines here. But if you have it nice and clean, you can see what you're paying the drivers. All right. So let's go over here to dispatch again, and let's test it. Let's just test the fuel part of it. So I'm just going to hit load type, import, Cargill again. We'll use the same load we used before. I'm going to go ahead and add my company driver. And we have our fuel and we have our base price. Let's remove the driver, show you that it is triggered by that driver. Sure enough, it disappears once I remove the driver. Okay. Now the last thing I wanted to talk about is cloning. So if we go back to drivers, driver pay rates, we'll start with charge profiles. The nice thing about creating charge profiles is outside of the tariff is you can clone them. So let's say I wanted to clone a fuel that's based on a fixed amount, right? I can simply go and click on clone charge profile. It'll create a fuel copy as you see here. But let's say this is going to be fuel, let's say pre-pull, right? This is only going to be used for pre-pull. Instead of it being percentage, it's going to be a fixed amount. And we'll say 10 bucks. And then I can go by leg, pickup container, drop container, and I'll just add the condition, dropped before delivery. So rather than going and build the whole thing again, I just make the little changes I need to and hit update profile. Now some of these might not be examples of things you do, but what I want you to get from this is that you can do additional, or you can clone these charge profiles to reflect whatever you need to. So if there's little small nuances that you need to change from profile to profile, the fastest way is to clone it. The same thing goes for the driver tariffs. If I select the test tariff here and I wanted to clone it, I can hit clone, and it'll give me basically the same thing that the previous tariff had. But let's say I need to change the customer. This is going to apply to Toyota. I can click that, and I can name this test tariff Toyota. And then let's say I'm just going to change this to 300. And then update, and you're done. Okay. So this is a very helpful tool if you need to create clones or create something similar, and it helps you move a lot more efficiently and faster. Well, that concludes this video on the driver pay training. Now there may be additional scenarios where you may need some assistance on. I highly recommend reaching out to your implementation manager, customer success manager. They'll be able to help you with your specific needs. But pretty much, if you follow these basics, they should give you a good starting point to accomplish your goals when it comes to driver pay. Thank you very much for joining me here, and take care.